Thank you for joining us. Please let me know if you can hear me clearly. Um, what I'm going to cover today is my own history, with breast cancer, and then some of the health disparities around breast cancer in communities of color. I also know that some of you out there may know a little bit more than I know about breast cancer. So I wouldn't mind at all if you chirp in at different times, especially Monique Robinson, who is a dear friend of the AnBryce Foundation and myself. So as far as my own history, I want to first take this time to thank my friends who were at my side. One of them, and I know Pam Anderson was one of those friends at my side. Thelma Duggan and others were at my side when I found out that I had breast cancer in 2007. And if my surgeon is on the line, I want to make sure that he knows, and I know he knows, that I am incredibly indebted to all his care of me during that time, and as well as now, because I am still under his care. And of course, my husband and my family, who, well, they are my rock of Gibraltar. So I am 100% sure if I did not go for my annual mammograms and do self-examination, I would not be here before you today. If there's nothing else you take away from this presentation today, please take away, keep your regular scheduled health checks. Please keep them on your calendar and go to them. Also do self-examinations. Also do some form of exercise daily, and then eat healthy. If that's all you take away from this presentation, I will be happy. I bet those in the Camp Dogwood world, meaning the parents and guardians in 2007 that were there, never had a clue that I had had major surgery just 2 weeks before camp opened. Because I was there. I was there at camp, maybe a little slower, but I was there at camp to make sure that your children were safe. I believe my quick recovery was due to the regimen, my exercise regimen, and as well as my eating habits. And in fact, Monique just got on the call and said, excuse her, she's not going to show herself because she just finished exercising. Well, I was up at 7 o'clock and I ran 4 miles and I did 300 jump ropes. So that's the kind of regimen I do each and every day. In 2007, I had just dropped off my children to school. They were in middle school in Washington, D.C., and I was riding on River Road, coming back to 495 because my home is right off 495. And for some reason, I just touched myself in a certain position, a certain place. And I felt this, it was almost like a pebble. And I said, whoa. And it just so happened that I was going to get my mammogram within a couple of weeks. And at that time, I was getting all of my health care from the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. So I went there and I told the doctor, and the doctor looked and took a biopsy, and sure enough, it was cancer. So I said, we didn't go over treatment therapy, but I did not want to be in Arizona if I had a long recuperation time. And because my husband and I have so many great and close relationships NYU, New York University, and of course the health center. I thought I would take everything there. I did have a second opinion that was with NYU, and we went over different therapy, different types of operation. One was a lumpectomy, another one was a mastectomy. But if I went through a lumpectomy, I would have to go through chemo and radiation, and that would knock me out several over a course of 6 months or however. And I did not want, this is me, I did not want to interrupt my exercise routine for that long, nor did I want to go on chemo, because I knew that chemo, I do not accept medications well. In fact, I feel sicker from the medications than if I just went naturally and let everything happen naturally. So that's why I did not. So I opted for a mastectomy. And one of the reasons, well, I can't say I opted for it. My surgeon recommended that I have a mastectomy because with the type of cancer that I had, which is triple negative cancer, which we'll go over that later on, he guaranteed it through a lumpectomy, I probably it would reoccur within 6 months or a year later. And I definitely did not want to go through that. So that really is my story in a nutshell. And people can ask me questions after. So now we'll go into some of the disparities in breast cancer. First of all, I want to say breast cancer is the most common cancer among women, accounting for nearly 1 of 3 cancers diagnosed in American women today. 2 million women living in the US have been treated for breast cancer. Each year, over 40,000 women die of breast cancer. These numbers I just mentioned and the slides you're about to see, which you see one of them, are all data gathered from NYU, University Langone Medical Center, where I had been treated, and I am now still under their care. So who gets breast cancer? You see here. You can read for yourself, but what I want to point out is that cancer deaths occur in women 50 and older. 77% of new cases and 84% of breast cancer deaths occur in women over 50. And after the age of 40, white women are more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer than Black women. And we'll go into that later. And then Black women are more likely to die from breast cancer than white women. Next slide. I guess everybody can see this. These are the incidence of mortality rates across racial lines. And as you can see, African-American women's death rate, which is in that little darker, I want to say pink, but it's another color, their death rate is higher than any other racial grouping. Okay, next slide. Okay, African-American women are diagnosed with breast cancer. Okay, white women survive 5 years okay, let me read this again. African-American women who are diagnosed with breast cancer are less likely than white women to survive 5 years after diagnosis. Okay, the rate among African-American women is 71% compared to 86% among white women. And the next one is, now this chart needs to be updated because the breast cancer incidences in African-American women have come a little bit closer than 17% to the white women. And I think on the chart before the new cases that are the chart about the incidences of mortality, that bar chart shows it closer. We are closer to white women in new cases, because I believe we are going and getting our exams. So this chart needs to be updated. That 17% is a little too low. But for women under 40, the incidences of breast cancer is higher in African American women. Okay, next chart. Did you understand that chart? I should ask that question first. Are you understanding the charts? Okay, does everybody understand them? And all in all, we have a less survival rate with breast cancer, and a lot of issues, lots of challenges amongst us with breast cancer. Okay, moving on. Next slide.
This is the next slide, Mrs. Welters.
Yeah, this is the next slide. Well, what happens is that when abnormalities are found in women of color, they don't come back for follow-up care, as you can see there. And I can say that having a cancer diagnosis, it is scary. I mean, you don't want to go back. You don't want to come to the realization that you have breast cancer. You don't. And that it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum of economics. Nobody wants to have that diagnosis. So you don't want to follow up, but the follow-up is the best thing you can do. Moving on. Well, here are some of the barriers, especially in the underserved communities. And this is where what my program focuses on, because of the mistrust of the healthcare system. I mean, especially with communities of color, you know, with the Tuskegee experiment on Black men and syphilis. That is one thing. In the American Indian population, the smallpox government-run program. So it goes on and on and on. Language barriers and communication issues. Many in the underserved communities they come from different countries. They're immigrants from different countries, so they have different languages that you have to parse through. Then cultural or religious concerns, there are many. And of course, there's a cancer stigma amongst many. And the fatalistic beliefs about cancer, because the C word for many means death, immediate death. Okay, and then also, one of the biggest things is access to quality health care, particularly in low or rural neighborhoods. In my own family and in my husband's family, when my husband was 7 years old, his mother had asthma and they were on welfare. And she had an asthma attack, and the welfare doctor came and gave her a penicillin shot and killed her. So, and also in my family, I was orphaned at the age of 12 because my parents didn't have access to quality health care. So also the socioeconomic status, including financial and insurance issues. You know, many in those communities don't have either. And then the health disparities, obesity, anxiety, depression, and any other of those other comorbidities that plague everyone, but plague particularly communities of color. And then discrimination and the availability of navigational resources. So all of these are something that we and my program focus on to help these low income women as well as men, because men can get breast cancer as well. So African American women and the biological factors. Okay. 20 and 30% of breast cancers in African American women are triple negative breast cancer diagnosis. And the only treatment is chemotherapy, or what I had was a mastectomy. So what is triple negative breast cancer? Okay, wait a minute. I'll hold that one for a minute. Whenever the doctors find a tumor in the breast, they take a biopsy and they look at the cells very closely. And we all have progesterone, estrogen, and something called the HER2 protein, which Monique can talk a lot more than I can about this. And Monique, you're going to follow me in a few minutes. So we all have those. But as I take a closer look at that cell, this is how I explain it, and I hope I'm explaining it right. They do not, progesterone and estrogen and the HER2 can be overproductive, and they can start creating these cancer, be a factor in these cancer cells. But if they don't see any of this, like an overproduction in these hormones, that means it's negative. So that means the therapy is very hard to prescribe. The therapy, if you have a progesterone a hormone that is overreactive and creating the cancerous tumor, then they know exactly what to do to try to eliminate that tumor and eliminate or reduce that tumor and eliminate others that might be coming. But if you don't have any of those receptors, then they don't. So, and we in the communities of color are diagnosed more than others with triple negative breast cancer. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, the BRCA1 mutation carrier. This is something that is a gene, I believe it's a gene, and families carry it. People need to be tested to see if they have this BRCA1 mutation carrier. And this is an indication that cancer, you will develop cancer in some way. Women of African American ancestry but have triple negative breast cancer, and young Hispanic women and women of low socioeconomic status can get triple negative breast cancer. White women get it too, but we get it at a more alarming rate than other cultures, other races. And this is I believe this is the last slide. As you can see, the percentages of non-Hispanic Blacks, what they are, it's a double that of non-Hispanic white. And you can see where it falls within the American Indian, Hispanic, and Asian and Pacific Islanders, where triple negative breast cancer falls. So we have a very high rate. And these tumors are more aggressive, they're larger, and they show up in much younger women. They show up in women of all ages, but they're showing up, there's an increasing amount of triple negative showing up in younger women under 30s. In the 30s, et cetera. So Monique, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hold on 1 second. Okay, here I am, not tidy, but good morning, everyone. As Mrs. Welters alluded to, I am a NYU Law AnBryce Scholar alum, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 32. I actually found my first breast lump when I was a 1L at NYU Law, and went to the health center. They did an exam. They actually found a second lump in my other breast. So they referred me to a radiologist who monitored me those 3 years. Didn't think anything needed to be done. So when I moved back to LA and had my own health insurance, I went to a doctor and they were like, you know what, let's biopsy this just to make sure. And we did the biopsy. One was totally fine. One was abnormal, not cancer, but abnormal. So because of that, they started sort of following me on an annual basis, and everything was, you know, just kind of fine. We removed that lump. It was fine. And I found a new lump. Just, you know, I did enough of a self-exam to realize I had something new and different, but also it kind of abutted the underwire of my bra, so it was easy to sort of find this new lump. It was in the same breast that had the abnormal biopsy. It was just in a different location of the breast. So as Mrs. Welters has alluded to, you know, they take a biopsy, they do the confirmation, they check your tumor for various characteristics to determine what kind of cancer your breast cancer is. Mine happened to be hormone receptive positive. So again, estrogen and progesterone, as Mrs. Welters was saying, was what was feeding my cancer. So the double-edged sword about that is, you know, you have more treatment options when you have, you know, estrogen positive cancer, but that means you get to have more treatment, right? So it's kind of yay and boo, because you have to take more medication, but you at least have that opportunity that triple negative doesn't really give you. So because the breast cancer was in the breast that had a history of issues, I went with a single mastectomy on that side. The reason I didn't go for a double is I didn't have a family history of breast cancer, and I tested negative for the BRCA mutations. And also my surgeon, her view was, you know, it doesn't really prevent the cancer from coming back. And that sounds maybe counterintuitive, but unfortunately, like Mrs. Welters or myself, or, you know, the doctors or people who have been afflicted with this sickness, you learn so much about it that you understand, oh, if it comes back as a recurrence, it's probably not coming back to that same breast or even the other breast. It's coming back to my bones, my brain, my lungs, my liver, right? Scary. So I went with the single mastectomy. What's interesting about my doctors, which I appreciated, they weren't automatically recommending chemo because of my age. They actually were able to, because of the type of breast cancer I had, there's a genetic test called an Oncotype DX that they could do on my tumor. And that sort of calculates your recurrence rate. And so based on that, it was high enough that they recommended chemo. So I did chemo. And then again, because I'm hormone receptor positive, I was able to take a medication called tamoxifen. And what that does is sort of help prevent estrogen from getting to any cancer cells that could linger. That's the sort of gold standard treatment. There was a little bit of discussion, sorry, I get super technical and I will wrap it up, but I have a long history. I get a little technical because there was a study that showed young women, so under age 35, premenopausal, who had hormone receptor positive breast cancer, actually benefited more from suppressing the function of their ovaries and getting an aromatase inhibitor. And that's a pretty aggressive treatment. And so we talked, my medical oncologist and I talked, and we said, okay, we'll do tamoxifen for 10 years. We'll avoid that very sort of, you know, harsh regimen. Well, within a year I recurred, which was insane. It was actually a local recurrence. Somehow I found, kind of like what Mrs. Welter said, you randomly sort of do something or brush against yourself and you realize there's something there. And it was hard to believe because I had a huge implant at this point. And unfortunately, like my doctors had moved on, so I had a new medical team, and they did the same workup, right? Okay, we found a lump. The radiologist has to do an ultrasound to find it. They take a sample of the tissue, and my goodness, it was breast cancer again. Somehow it had come back in the same breast that had the cancer before, that went through the mastectomy. It's like mind blown. So they do a whole new workup when it comes back, because again, they're concerned about it spreading. So I had to undergo PET scans and all this different stuff. And actually my PET scans showed that it had spread to certain lymph nodes. And so did another mastectomy, but I also did a prophylactic on the other side, because I was like, I'm done with this. And then underwent more chemo, radiation. My doctors were like, let's just make sure. They gave me additional oral chemo after that. And now I am on the regimen that suppresses my ovary function, because again, that's the powerhouse that creates the estrogen that makes your cancer grow. And an aromatase inhibitor that blocks any last remnants of breast cancer. So I have quite a long history, but one thing that Mrs. Welters said that I just wanted to underscore, my mantra since going through this is eat better, drink less, exercise more, and know your breasts. And that's kind of very much in line with what Mrs. Welters was saying, where there's little things you can do that you might already be doing. I was really healthy. I was underweight probably, and it still happened to me, right? People who are very healthy get this. So all you can do is try and make decisions to make your chances of getting this as minimal as possible. So eat better, drink less alcohol, exercise more, and know your breasts. And I say that as someone who's young, who at least had enough familiarity with my breasts to know when something was different. Because a lot of my friends are like, I don't know how to do a breast exam, or I don't do them, right? I'm like in my 30s. Start by just familiarizing yourself, because then you'll know your breasts, so you'll know when something's different. So that was my story in a nutshell. I'll hand it back to you, Mrs. Welters.
Thank you, Monique. And now that I have the gallery on view, I see an old classmate of mine, Kimberly Sizemore. How are you? I see Monique Harps, who was a counselor at camp. I see Pat Jacobs, who she needs to hide herself. But anyway, Liz and everyone else. But I'm wondering if we have any of the doctors on the line. No? I was hoping that my surgeon would be on the line. No. Okay, because he had written back. I see Liz. Hi, Liz. How are you doing? So I guess we'll go into maybe some other people might want. Kimberly, do you want to share your story or what? No? Yeah. Take off a mute. She's my roommate in college. Get off a mute. Kimba. Okay.
How's that?
Fine.
How's that?
You want to share your story?
Good morning. Early detection is the key. I had lost a very good friend of mine, one of my dear college friends, to breast cancer. I was so busy helping her and her family, I neglected for my own breast exam. I had a lump. We followed the lump. I had, it was invasive ductal carcinoma, spread to my lymph nodes. I have a cousin that's a radiologist. I have my work done at UCLA. My cousin, who's in private practice, felt that as a teaching hospital, all the tests took too long. She was very impatient. I had asked her to be my advocate. After they discovered the tumor, it took so long for them to get everything together. I had a lot of tests, ladies, and it was harrowing. But I was determined, and I was told by my group that they told me it's curable. And when I went to the meeting, when you meet the surgeon, the radiologist, and the oncologist, all I heard in an hour was, it's curable. Everything else was like, I was like, what? So I had a guide. My goddaughter, Joey Jacoby, was with me. Her mother had just died the month before. She came with me to my appointments. My cousin got very upset with me because she felt that things weren't going fast enough. She said, listen, I'm taking you out of this place. You're going to come with me. You're going to come to my people, and we're going to take care of this. I went to the Pink Lotus Breast Center in Beverly Hills. I went to Christy Funk, who has a book out called, I don't know, I'll get the book and show you, a genius, a surgeon who performed the lumpectomy. I had to have lymph nodes. I had to do lumpectomy, chemotherapy, another lumpectomy, more chemotherapy and radiation, 10 months. And I survived. And it's an unbelievable, when these people talk about a battle, it is a battle, but if it's here and it's here and you have the right people, you can survive. Early detection is the key. I'm a survivor. That's my story.
Thank you, Kimberly. And as you know, she was a English and drama major. So this is the drama, though. Anyway, thank you for sharing your story, Kimberly. Is there anyone else that can share their story before we go into some the question and answer phase, if they have? Okay. So are there any questions? Any questions? I don't see any.
I have a question, Ms. Welters. I know Monique mentioned about eating and not drinking, like food-wise. Is there anything, I mean, obviously not a lot of processed food, but are there other foods that we should make sure or try to get more of in our diet to kind of like help us, I guess, balance our nutrition to put us in a better position to not maybe decrease our chances?
Okay, I would give that to Monique, because Monique, it could be a physician at this point, as far as I'm concerned.
So it's a great question. And, you know, I have a JD, not an MD. So let me just make that very clear. You know, I guess the most straightforward way I would answer that for you is, like you said, not processed food, you know, minimize your processed foods, increase your fruits and vegetables, you know, really read labels, try to buy organic where it can make sense, you know, to avoid pesticides or hormones, antibiotics in your meat, that sort of thing. I think the hard thing, and the thing I found very frustrating going through breast cancer treatment, is so much is known, but more is unknown. And you know, you can find someone that says, eat the Mediterranean diet, eat the keto diet, eat plant-based diet. And none of those is foolproof. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I met a woman who was a vegan, super healthy, and she was in a breast cancer, you know, meeting with me. So there's no foolproof way, but I do think, just for general health, right? Like, just be mindful of what you put in your body. And now that we know that certain things, pesticides, hormones, can have an effect, I would say minimize those. But, you know, that being said, you also have to live, right? Like, if I have an occasional glass of wine, I have a piece of dark chocolate every day. You know, it's not that I don't eat any sugar, period, but I try to be very mindful of how much sugar I'm eating and when, and that sort of thing, or that sort of thing. So you know, I remember, I also remember thinking when I was in a cancer group, just very briefly, there was a woman who was in her 80s and brought like a patty melt for lunch. And I was like, you know, my head wanted to explode, because I'm like, wow, I'm trying to eat really well. And I'm here sitting with this woman who is not eating really well. And so, you know, you can do the best you can, but it's not foolproof. So I think just trying to make sure for your general health, you're just putting the best things possible in your body. You're taking care of your body with rest and exercise. You're not smoking, you know, you're minimalizing, you're drinking. I think that helps you, but to underscore Kimberly, Mrs. Welters, and I hope what came through mine, early detection is key. And so familiarizing with yourself with your body so you can discern a change when it happens is key. But I also want to say, you know, you got to live your life and you got to enjoy, because you might be a little salty if, you know, all you did was drink, you know, vegan protein shakes and you ended up with breast cancer anyway.
Thank you, Monique. Okay, Liz Hayes, the
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson expert. Okay, go on.
Hardly. This is really very interesting and informative for someone who has been blessed not to have this kind of a situation. But there's always so much focus on the stages of cancer, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm wondering, is that still a guidepost in the context of breast cancer? I mean, I'd never heard of the triple negative before. Or is that sort of the old standard because there are so many variations within cancer? Sorry. And then my second question is, how much did you all find having support groups? How helpful was that as you go through this process? It's hard to share what you go through with somebody who hasn't experienced it. But did you all find that being able to share and hear from other people made a real difference in the ongoing process and recovery? Sorry.
Well, as far as the stages, I would have to get back to you on the stages, but I do know that the early detection before first stage or near first stage is better. And I do know that for many of the women that are in my program, unfortunately, they are in the last stages because they have waited too long. They have waited too long to come for medical help. So I will get that question answered for you because I can't answer it directly. And maybe Monique can, Monique, you can answer it? Great.
Again, not an MD, but been around the block a couple times. So breast cancer is interesting because it starts at stage 0 and goes up to stage 4. And stage 0 is the earliest form of breast cancer. It's called DCIS. And what it is your tumor has formed in, let's say, a milk duct, but it hasn't started to leave that milk duct. So it's unclear if it would always stay inside or if it would start to become invasive and start to spread beyond that one milk duct. So that's the earliest form of breast cancer. And some even call it precancer, but it's stage 0. That's the earliest form, usually treated by, you know, surgery. Again, if you're able to catch it at stage 0 when it hasn't spread out of that milk duct. And sometimes surgery is enough. Sometimes people get, you know, maybe tamoxifen if they know it's hormone receptor positive, but that's the earliest stage.
Can I?
Yes, please.
So DCIS is ductal carcinoma in situ, meaning it's in one place.
Yes, it's still in the place where it formed. Exactly. And so as you move up the stages, like stage 1 and 2 are still relatively early. It depends on often like the size. And as you move up the stages, it also then becomes like size of the tumor with any effects on lymph nodes, you know, 3 lymph nodes, 1 lymph, you know, so there's like a little formula where you can kind of see like all the things they add as you get to up the stages. And then stage 4 is metastatic. So it has spread beyond your lymph nodes, typically to your brain, your bones, your lungs, or your liver. Those are the most common places breast cancer metastasizes. But yeah, you know, when you get the information, you can kind of see more clearly, like, okay, if your tumor's this size and you have this many lymph nodes, this is what stage you are. So I was diagnosed at stage 3, and then I recurred, diagnosed at stage 1, and then I recurred, and I don't know, it's squirrely. I don't know. I'm like stage 3C. I don't even know. And then on the support groups, which is interesting. So there's a great, I think it's called Cancer Community Center. I think they have a few throughout the country, and they offer all sorts of services: yoga, watercolor, counseling, all sorts of things for cancer patients and survivors. And I wanted to be able to take advantage of the yoga, and the price of entry was, oh, well, you have to go to at least 3 support group sessions. So I was like, okay. So I went with an open mind, and the first one I went to, it's interesting. There was a mix of women, some younger, some older. One of the women was my kindergarten teacher, and I was like, this is crazy. But for as much community as it can provide, I guess based on my personality, I actually did not personally find it helpful, because everyone deals with their diagnosis and treatment so differently. And there were some women that were really struggling, right? And that wasn't me. Or they were very like, woe is me, and that wasn't me. And, if ever there's a place you need to be empathetic, it's the support group. But if you're being annoyed by how people are behaving, like, I didn't need to be there. But what I did for support, and Mrs. Welters can attest to, is I sent out these email blasts to friends and family on a regular interval where I could update them. But it was almost like a journal. It was very cathartic for me, and I could talk about the successes and the failures and the joys and the pains and the funny moments and the really scary moments, and sort of bring them in and have them sort of writing along with me. So I drew upon the people I knew as my support sort of group, as opposed to like a designated breast cancer support group. But the other thing I would say is I like doing things like this. So, I now, I guess, pay it forward and am a resource for other women. Like, unfortunately, this disease afflicts so many people that I've been able to be a resource to lots of other women. So like, I like supporting them, but I was just not a fan of support groups personally.
And Kimberly, you want to go?
Um, unmute. Am I unmuted? I didn't join a support group. I was so overwhelmed. I had a stage 3 diagnosis. I was so overwhelmed with what I had to do and the work I had to put into it, which was, a lot. The hospital, I was at Cedars-Sinai. They had a huge program, and you're able to take part if you're in the cancer program. And I didn't go. They had yoga, they had mental health, they had nutrition. All of these things are just, hand in hand with this cure and helping you get through this. I didn't take part in too much. I did, my food intake changed. Not too much else changed. I was very fortunate enough so that I'm a fresh food person. I don't do a lot of takeout. I don't do a lot of processed food too much anymore. Never did really. And I just doubled down on that. And I didn't take many. They give you a lot of medicine to take aside from the chemotherapy. And I turned down all the medicine because I use a cannabis, and in California, we have access now to things that we can use that just take a lot of the discomfort and a lot of the inconvenience of chemotherapy. It brings it to a level where you are able to deal, and it extremely helpful. And you can get medical on the East Coast, and aside from California, Colorado, the people that you can go to dispensaries, they have these dispensaries, and these things are invaluable. And your peace of mind is very important. You have to know what you're doing and know that you will get through this. And that's how I did it.
For me, you know, all my anxiety and things was before my surgery. And the day of my surgery, I was just as calm as could be. I was very calm. And after that, I was so grateful. I was so grateful that everything worked out well. I did not seek any support group at all. The support group I had was my family. I had Thelma, I had Pam, I had, and most of these people didn't even have cancer, except that I did have one friend, I have one friend, Alexine Jackson, who had breast cancer. She's probably in her late 80s right now. And her family is the one that has that BRCA1 gene. And so she was the one that stepped me through everything before my surgery. Actually, she even came, she was in the waiting room when I went into surgery and stayed with me a couple of days. So was Thelma, so was her brother, Thelma's brother and her sister and everybody. I remember waking up out of, waking up after the surgery, and in my room, it would almost look like a church. The people were all around looking at me, but I didn't feel the need to go to a support group because just like Monique, I was uplifted. I wasn't sad. I was moving forward. I was moving forward. So that is my story. But talking about my friend Alexine Jackson, who unfortunately right now has Alzheimer's, but her daughters with that gene, both of her daughters have predeceased her within 5 months of one another because of that gene. Breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and a son predeceased her as well, because I think he had colon cancer. So you need to be tested for that BRCA1. Am I correct, Monique? That BRCA1 gene.
Yeah, there's BRCA1 and BRCA2.
BRCA1.
And actually, it's amazing. There's now other mutations and genes they've associated with breast cancer. So there's like 25 to 80 panel gene sort of panels they can test you for, not just for predisposition to breast cancer and ovarian cancer, but other cancers. So I actually just redid my genetic testing because it's advanced in 5 years, but knock on wood, nothing crazy or new popped up.
And I'm glad you brought up genetic testing. In my program, we are trying to get many of the women into genetic testing, but again, we're fighting this mistrust thing. Some have entered, but genetic testing is key to finding out why, how, and how to treat these things in these disparities in the community. I do see something from, is it Michael Coven? He says, thanks for this discussion. As a father of 4 young ladies and the husband who has watched my wife lose her mother and grandmother to this disease, I am grateful for any information to share with anyone I encounter. Again, many thanks. You are appreciated. Fine, we will get to you because we will keep on this topic, but I do have my program at NYU Bellevue, and whomever wants a copy of this, we can send it out. So you can email Jalicia to request a copy of that, and we will keep on this. Any direct questions, medical questions, I will get on top with my my team at Bellevue to find out an answer for you.
Jennifer, I think Mrs. Welters, Jennifer had a question. She had her hand raised.
Okay, Jennifer, I didn't see that. Sorry. Yeah, Jennifer, you're on mute.
Okay. I was trying to get off mute. I'm on my cell phone. I'm sorry to have joined late. So if you addressed this at the beginning, forgive me. I was on with my student at the book for the ELA session. I had sort of a compound question. How do you evaluate your care or your options? You know, your thoughts around second opinions about diagnosis, care, and options, and that process. And what does that do to your relationship with your initial physician and teams? So how would you approach that, or how did you approach that? I think one person who shared said they were headed for one thing, and then they ended up going somewhere else. Yeah, thank you in advance.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic. Well, I brought my diagnosis to the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. And I do remember it was in May that I went to the Mayo Clinic. And it was probably a week before Memorial Day weekend. And they said that they were going to send or call me with my results. Well, it was after Memorial Day weekend, which probably was about 7 days later or 8 days later after my biopsy, and nobody had called me. I had to call them. And then they told me. But I had, and that was a no-go for me. That was a pure no-go for me, but also the fact that it was so far away. So that's why I went to NYU, where we had relationships, and I knew I was going to get the best of care. I knew I would get top-notch quality care, which is one of the reasons, and I got it very quickly, which was one of the reasons I sat back and thought, what about these low-income women? What about them? And so that's was the genesis of my whole program, to give them access. I had access to, you know, I could have called the top doctors of in the world, really, with the connections that my husband and I had. But what about these women? So I went to NYU because I already had a relationship there. And my doctor and I are very close to this day. He still is my doctor. But
what she didn't tell you is he's extremely handsome.
Whatever. So anyway, so you know, there was already a built-in relationship there and a trust, and I knew that my my best interests were in their hands. Okay, Monique.
Yeah, I can speak to this as well. So perhaps being an inquisitive person as a lawyer, I did, once I got my diagnosis, I basically spent the weekend between the diagnosis and meeting my surgical oncologist for the first time reading. And by reading, I knew, what would be expected in terms of recommendations and that sort of thing. Because to the point that Mrs. Welters has sort of woven through her presentation, the disparities for women of color, speak for themselves. And so you also have to advocate for yourself so you don't become this kind of statistic. So I was like, I'm going to make sure I know what standard course of sort of care is, so I can see if the doctor's recommending that. And when I met my surgical oncologist, she was phenomenal. Like, I've never had a doctor I wanted to be friends with, but she was like someone I wanted to be friends with. And she was great. And she, like, because I had done my research, everything that I had sort of written down that she should bring up, she brought up. And that was a great feeling. So, she was warm. She had a great bedside manner, but I trusted her both in terms of her demeanor and her recommendations, which was great. When I recurred, what was interesting is she and my medical oncologist had both left to go to different places or private sector, whatever it was. So I had a new doctor, and I didn't have a great connection with her, but for better or for worse, in my view, when you get your initial diagnosis, it's often very formulaic. Oh, you're stage 1 with this kind, this is what we do. You're stage 3 with this kind, this is what we do. When you recur, it's more art than science at that point, right? Because it's like you need your expertise and your team and all of this experience to sort of realize, okay, how are we going to troubleshoot this? Because she already did that. What do we do new? So that's when I was like, I want a second opinion because it's not formulaic, it's a recurrence. I need to see what two people have to say about my recurrence. And so I went to a second place, and then I saw the replacement for my doctors who had left, and I did not like the medical oncologist that replaced my medical oncologist. She did not seem to appreciate the fact that I had questions, which was a big no-no for me because I'm always going to be respectful in asking my questions, but maybe by the benefit of, you know, being able to educate myself on this, I can ask intelligent questions. And if you can't handle that, then like, forget it. Plus, I also just didn't really like her. And the thing is, like, I don't need to have my doctor be my friend. I don't need my doctor to give me a hug. I have a husband, I have a mom, I have plenty of people to give me affection. But if I don't trust you, that's like ding number one. And, you know, because I had a second opinion, I could ask her questions and she was proposing completely different things in a way that I was like, I do not trust you. And I don't like you. So then it was like, okay, forget about it. So I actually split my care between two different facilities. I did most of my treatment at Norris, which is USC's cancer hospital, but for medical oncology, I went to City of Hope. So I actually have two medical teams. And, you know, like to this day, I'm like, I will not speak that doctor's name because she's the only one that I've ever felt like I do not like this woman or trust her. So I think for me, I didn't initially think about a second opinion, but when it came back, because it's just a much more unique situation, I went for the second opinion. And I'm glad I did because I could really compare and also see like, no, this isn't a good fit. So I need someone else.
I don't know if Kimberly, she's on the phone, but I don't know whether she wants to say a few words because we're going to have to wrap up in a few minutes. Am I correct, Jalicia? Okay. Kimberly,
Yes, hi.
do you have a few words on the question out there?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. I was on a phone call. I'm
Well,
sorry.
How can I
The
rephrase?
question was about evaluating your care, thoughts on second opinions, the process, and what that does to your relationship with your initial team.
Me personally, I did not want to leave the UCLA, my first people, because they had done all of the tracking and everything of the tumor. But I was advised to go to the new group. All I did was call them and they were very, very cool. They were like, listen, we just want you to get better. And it's about you. It's not about them. We want you to get better. If you feel that this is what you have to do, I left. My cousin took me to her people and I thrived with David Hoffman and Christy Funk and Dr. Rosalind Morell. I thrived with these people and I don't regret it. It's a life or death decision. So I want to live. I wanted to live. Bye. Doctors, they want you to live.
Mhm. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you very much. So if there are other questions, we can take them offline and you can send them to the Jalicia and we'll get back to you. But I just want to say, I do hope this presentation will serve as a wake-up call to a lot of you. And I was hoping that more of our parent group would be on this call, this Zoom call, because I just think they are the ones that would benefit from this greatly, because especially with women, we deal with everyone else's problems and we don't focus on our problems. That just becomes last. I see it with the women that we deal with at NYU. You know, they can't come for their mammogram because they don't have a babysitter. Some of them are taking care of their grandchildren. They don't have this, they don't have that. And we made it all possible for all those things they can't have an excuse anymore. They have to come. So I just hope it's a wake-up call, even for those that are on this line. The young people think, huh. I remember when I was in the hospital and I had my surgery, there was another girl there. I think she was in her 20s. She had breast cancer, you know. It does not discriminate. Age, whatever, does not discriminate. And the best thing is early detection. Keep your scheduled mammograms, and also, you know, be in tune with yourself. I think that's what Monique was saying. Make sure I always say, I'm always checking in on myself to see what is, something feels weird here, or, you know, how am I feeling? Blah, blah, blah. Always be in tune with yourself. Because you can't help anybody else. Like I tell the women in our program, you can't help anybody else if you're sick.
Right.
So get your stuff in order first. You know?
There's a message in the chat, wanted to know, is there any way we could save this and share it with others?
Yeah, we absolutely, yeah. So thank you, Ms. Duggan. And thank you, Mrs. Welters. I think that as someone who, my grandmother passed away from cancer, this is probably the most information I've ever really gotten beyond, you know, just do a breast exam and early prevention. The level of detail and knowledge that is on this call, I think is immensely important. I think that this educational series that we're providing so directly aligns to the mission of the foundation, where it's really about providing resources, whether that is educational resources, whether that is access to individuals who have information that we don't have. I think that this is incredibly, incredibly important. As someone who just recently had their first mammogram, even when I had it, I was doing it because that's what I was told that I was supposed to do. And so I think to have young scholars, to have women of a variety of different ages to share their stories is incredibly important. I think that even the small setting or being on a Zoom and the personalization that you've shared, and just the stories of you, Mrs. Welters, Monique, and your former roommate, Kimberly, I think that that is important, because I think the stories and the narratives help to shape the why we need to have early prevention or why we need to eat better. So I am deeply grateful to everyone on the call. We are recording this, and so everyone will have access to it. And I genuinely encourage you to share it. Go ahead, Mrs. Welters.
I have a friend on the line, Pat Jacobs. Do you have anything to say, Pat? You always have something to say. Huh?
Come on, Pat. Take it off mute.
Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
This is unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. No, I think this was very interesting, B, and I think we should find a way to spread it, because I think there are any number of women who have challenges but are not going to tell us, nor tell themselves, quite frankly. Since this is kind of a hush-hush, kind of a hidden secret until you in fact attract or catch some of this cancerous diseases that we've been talking about. I've obviously found it very interesting, enjoyable. I'm going to tell some more folks about what you guys are doing, because I have a whole set of people who would benefit from hearing, particularly from women who have had the experience of having this challenge. I think it would make a big difference. I also have a bunch of doctors who are doctors of color, who are clients of mine, who are very interested in this. And I suspect it would have been beneficial, if I'd known what you were doing, to have them around and available to hear this. So thank you for telling me about this, Ms. Welters. As usual, you're doing a great job, of course. And I hope that we can find a way to get some of those medical professionals knowledgeable about this. I think they care. I just don't think they know. They don't have the sources, and they've not met women who are very, very concerned about this and who want to find a solution. I just don't think they know. So we'll have to figure that one out.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me, though. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining us. I just want to say one more thing, and that is I had the opportunity to live in a Caribbean nation for about 2.5 years. And the Caribbean, we need to be spreading the word in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
You know, oh, you're a Trini, Brittany?
Yeah.
Brittany's a Trini.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to be spreading this word. And these are the difficulties of the immigrants that live in low-income areas here in Washington, and all over this country. And what we find in New York, because I've seen it face to face, it's the cancer, what did I say? They're afraid of cancer, the cancer stigma. Having cancer, it's a stigma, and then this fatalistic views, and then all the cultural and religious things are all tied up in there, all confused, and we definitely need to make some leeway into those populations. So that's all I want to say. I am so happy I didn't, Monique and Kimberly, I didn't know who was going to be on. I thought I was going to be the one holding up the whole thing, but thank you for your input. Very, very informational. And maybe we need to get together. This cannot be a one-off, obviously.
Correct.
We need to get together, Monique, Kimberly, Jay, and others, to see how we can just keep on informing those that need to be informed about this.
To add to that point, on October 24th, we are going to be talking about colon cancer.
Yes.
Mrs. Welters and I thought it was incredibly important, even though, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, to talk about it, given the untimely death of Chadwick Boseman and him only being 42 years old. So we will continue to send out our information. Please send it out to your fathers and husbands and brothers and cousins, and ensure that they are getting this information, because the best prevention too is information and being informed.
And mothers too. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice Saturday.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.